Herbert, and I'm the chair of the Department of Urban and Regional Planning here at Jackson State University. And we're just very, very delighted to have you guys here. We have some of you in person, and we have a wonderful lunch for you, and some of you who are not in person, who are going to miss our lunch. However, that being said, our department takes pride in being involved in a myriad of research opportunities. But we're specifically interested in research that touches the community's lives, that help educate our communities and to help our communities to thrive. So this is one such research project that we're going to talk about today. But in getting started, what we're going to do, we're going to have some official welcome. I'm going to begin first with my dean. His name is Dr. Wilbur Walters Jr., and he is the dean of the College of Science, Engineering, and Technology, and we are actually in his building and in his space. Welcome, Dr. Walters.
I'd like to welcome everybody here to Jackson State University and College of Science, Engineering, and Technology. I also like to thank Dr. Herbert and her team who put this on today. They are always stalwarts as it relates to topics in the community. I also like to thank our guests and in particular Kellogg Foundation. I look forward to a lively conversation today and hope that you do too. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Walters. And as Dr. Walters mentioned, we have a very important guest in the house today. We've got, all research is sponsored by a variety of organizations, one of which is the Kellogg Foundation in conjunction with Jobs to Move America, which you're going to hear a little bit about. But today, this particular opportunity is made possible with the support of the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. And as such, I'd love to introduce to you Paula Collins-Summons to say a few words on behalf of the foundation. Paula is a senior program manager with the organization with over 30 years of experience. Her experience is in philanthropy in areas such as economic inclusion, job quality, and climate, economic, and racial justice. While her work is often national in scope, her current assignment is in the South. Please do welcome Paula.
Good morning, and thank you so much for that warm welcome, Dr. Herbert. And thank you also to Jackson State University for hosting this really important discussion on job quality and equity. And on behalf of the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, I'd like to welcome all of you. At the Kellogg Foundation, our goal is for all children to thrive. And we want them to be successful across school, work, and life, however that may look for them. But we also know that in order for children to thrive, they need to grow up in economically secure families. And we also know that for them to be successful, they need to grow up in communities that are equitable places to live. And that's why we're here today. We know that when families have good jobs, that their children and families do better. This means being in jobs that pay a living wage, where there are good benefits, and where there also are equitable opportunities for upward mobility, and where they are safe at their job. We also know that when families are in good paying jobs, not only are families better off, but so are their communities and the companies that they work for. The manufacturing sector is an important set of employers for our families here in the South. And today's conversation is an important one. I hope we can build partnerships between our companies and our communities and work towards solutions that really help strengthen quality jobs and equity for our families, which will in turn strengthen the South. In closing, thank you again to Jackson State University for hosting, for Dr. Herbert for your authorship, and also Jobs to Move America for your incredible partnership. And then Alabama A&M University, Dr. Emily Erickson, who is now at University of Warwick, for also leading and authoring this important research. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paula, and we really do look forward to some more communication and collaboration with the Kellogg Foundation for sure. So what I'm gonna do now, based on the structure of your program, we are going to look at the purpose of today's event. So, as I indicated prior, our department becomes involved in a variety of activities, research activities. And as the Department of Urban and Regional Planning, our interest is community and community development and workforce development and making sure that our communities are healthy, equitable, safe, and all of those indicators that we've been talking about recently. So the specific purpose of this particular event is to look at a research, a piece of research that was conducted, and you've heard Dr. Emily Erickson, her name mentioned prior. She is the author of this research. She is the brain behind all of this. So what we're going to do is to take a look at some of the findings of the research. So Mississippi and Alabama continue to struggle with some of the worst socioeconomic and equity indicators. And this is despite decades of growth, particularly in the manufacturing sector. Today, we're going to release this new report. This report seeks to shed light on the lived experiences of manufacturing workers in the state of and Alabama. The intent is to understand the impact of these facilities, what impact they have made on local, individual, and communities and economies in general. The report investigates a range of dimensions of job quality to the analysis of data collected on over 1,300 workers from these manufacturing facilities. And the dimensions of job quality really was to assess some of the challenges, the understanding what are some of the challenges some of these workers face and where do we go from here? So today is really about a discussion about what can we do, what are some of the elements that we want to pay attention to when it comes to job quality, and where do we go from here? So I'm really excited about what we intended to do today. So my next thing is that I'm going to introduce our main speaker, Dr. Emily Erickson, and we are having her on Zoom. So just to back up a little bit, I have to tell you guys for half a second about this. I can't give you the term, but the team that I've worked, there were three of us, mostly myself, Emily, and Ian. And Emily, she is an amazing person. And I had the opportunity, guess what, of hiring Emily at Alabama A&M University a number of years ago. Life has a way of coming full circle. And so, I hired her. Then she went off and did this research, and she came back to me and she said, hey, Dr. Herbert, would you mind helping me with this research? So between Ian, the Victor Butts, who is the consultant and managed all of these things, we've been working together for a year now. And it's really my delight in introducing to you, Emily, today. So she, of course, like I indicated, she's my colleague, and she's the brains behind this operation. She's currently, though, Emily is in England. Emily is in England, I'm in Mississippi, and Ian was in Washington. So that was an amazing piece. So Dr. Erickson is currently a research fellow at Warwick Institute for Employment Research at the University of Warwick in Coventry, England. Prior to joining the Institute, Emily was an assistant professor at Alabama A&M University in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning in Huntsville, Alabama. There she taught and supervised graduate and undergraduate planning students. While at Alabama A&M University, Emily served as the principal investigator on the Southern Manufacturing Worker Survey Project, which is what we're going to talk about today. Emily has research experiences in examining the link between job quality and productivity and a variety of work, exploring the lives experienced by low-wage workers. Emily has a PhD in urban planning from the Luskin School of Public Affairs at the University of California, Los Angeles, and an MA in Latin American Studies from the University of California, San Diego. So I am going to turn over to Emily, and she is going to go into details about some of the report. But please give Emily a hand and welcome.
Thank you so much for that incredibly kind introduction, Dr. Herbert. It has been an absolute pleasure to work with you on this project, and of course, Ian, who is, I'm sure, behind the scenes there, and so many of us. And I wish I could have been there in person, but I'm thrilled to be able to participate virtually. And as I'm talking here, I'm also trying to get my slides up on the screen and hoping that you can see this. Let's see. Yes, I think, does that look about correct? Great, I'm getting a thumbs up, thank you. And okay, sorry about that. So good morning, everybody. Again, I'm really excited to be here and have this opportunity to share this report with all of you. And I'm really particularly grateful to have the opportunity to discuss the implications of this type of research with the panel that's assembled that we'll hear from later, and hopefully from some of our audience members through question and answers towards the end of the session. I want to take a moment to also say thank you to the JSU team for making today possible, especially hybrid events are never easy. So thank you for what I'm sure were a few headaches to get us here. And of course, the WK Kellogg Foundation and Jobs to America for their support of this event and the report and the entire research project that went behind it. And last but not least, my former family over in Huntsville, the Alabama A&M University, Department of Community and Regional Planning, the students there, the staff and faculty that supported me as we started this project and now as we bring it over the finish line. So lots of thank yous there. This morning, what I'd like to do is to share a bit about the story of this report that we're talking about and presenting today, why we decided to undertake the research, how we went about doing it, how we kind of interpreted or contextualized our data, and then share some key findings. I'll end with a really brief look at kind of where we might go from here. And my hope is that that will give a nice segue into our panel discussion. I'm going to do my best to stick to time. If it seems like I'm running over, please treat this like the Oscars and cue the music, and I will then know to wrap it up. Okay. So where did we start? How did we get here? So this report, part of which is pictured here on the right, is why we're here today. Back in 2019, I had discussions with some researchers and advocates, including folks from JMA, or Jobs to Move America, about some of the working conditions in manufacturing facilities across the American South. At that time, I was still fairly new to the region, but it was hard to miss the sprawling production plants that kind of peppered our landscape. And I had previous experience conducting worker surveys. And so these conversations and previous experiences kind of came together and this research project was born. What we really wanted to do was try to understand what's it like inside some of these facilities, and then what is the impact they're having on our communities. So kind of an inside-outside look. A bit of kind of regional or economic context, I think, is also significant or might be useful here to help frame part of our conversation. So a cornerstone of local and state level economic development strategies in Mississippi and Alabama, as well as other places, has been to try to recruit manufacturing facilities to open in their jurisdictions. The idea here is that using and investing public money and providing tax and non-tax incentives to encourage private businesses to locate in a jurisdiction. And the hope is that this will serve as what we call a big push that would kickstart a virtuous cycle of investment and economic growth, right? So that's the aim or the ambition here. And we've put a lot of money behind this, right? So since the mid-90s, it's estimated that Alabama and Mississippi together have probably spent nearly $10 billion on corporate subsidies to attract and retain major organizations to operate facilities in our backyards. And to some extent, right, this has worked. We now have a really significant portion of our population that's employed in the manufacturing sector. And the region receives some of the highest rates of foreign investment as international firms open production and manufacturing facilities in the region. However, despite all of this, and as we've talked about and foreshadowed a little bit, we know that our communities are continuing to struggle, right? Health, education, poverty, overall kind of childhood well-being indicators all routinely show Mississippi and Alabama ranking kind of towards the bottom, right? If not the very bottom of US states. And furthermore, right, race-based inequalities and those continuing legacies of racial discrimination remain core challenges that face the region. As Geographer Clyde Woods wrote about unequal, or what he would call plantation relations in his phrasing, unequal relations can be reproduced under a variety of conditions, so long as there's no systematic challenge to that status quo. So in other words, how I interpret this is this idea that economic development atop unequal systems won't magically fix that inequality. We need to be much more purposeful about it. So with this kind of context, right, the hope of promise of for recruitment and jobs, but then the reality of communities that are still struggling, that's where we're placing this work. That's what we're trying to figure out. Our report asks why. Why is this happening? So that's what we do. We look at the nature of work in these facilities to see if there's something about that might help us understand that link between jobs and overall well-being at the individual and community level. So armed with this kind of research question, we assembled our team of researchers, and we're grateful for the funding we received from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation to undertake what became a very multi-year study of manufacturing workers and communities and community members. Okay, so I won't go into too much detail here because what I'm doing also is getting some high-level overview of what's in the report. So please, shameless plug, download the report. There'll be links available if you don't have one already. But what I do want to do is just give some high-level overview of how we went about actually doing this work so you understand how we came to the conclusions that we came to. So to understand the impact of manufacturing employment on our communities, we designed a project that would combine two surveys in the hopes that we'd get then a more holistic view. So we have a survey of workers from inside manufacturing facilities to understand the nature of work and the quality of jobs. And then we have a second survey, which is for residents to understand their perspectives on the local opportunities and needs in those communities. It was a challenge to recruit participants to the project. Now, it's almost always hard to get workers to complete a survey. It's hard to get anyone to complete a survey. I'm sure we've all been stopped outside Walmart and asked to participate in a survey. Most of us just keep walking. If we're lucky, right, maybe you get a smile and a no thank you. But it's hard to ask people to give up their time to engage in something like this. But it was, so we anticipated that, but it was especially hard for this project to get workers to speak with us and fill out the survey. Some assumed that we were either, quote, union researchers or spies for their bosses. Of course, we were neither. We're just an academic research project, right? Committed to research integrity and upholding ethics and trying to ask important questions so that we can have important discussions. So that was a challenge. And then, of course, the pandemic hit and any in-person recruitment efforts had to be swiped, right? So what we did instead is learned pretty quickly how to do targeted ads on social media and drive participants to our online surveys that way. A note about kind of the analysis that we're doing. Our primary focus in this report is on a regional analysis of our results. So we're looking at survey responses regardless of where the workers live and or where they work. And that's what we're talking about today, and that's what the main focus of the report is. We do have a series of case studies in our appendix of the report that look at specific sites and communities, and you can read that on your own in the report if you're interested. Last point here is I just do want to take a moment to acknowledge the incredible and diverse team of researchers and supporters that have touched this project over the past couple of years. Amazing student researchers that participated and a number of community collaborators who helped us spread the word about the survey, particularly our community survey. We used local contacts to draw on local knowledge. We provided paid employment for students and interns while also providing them with research experience and exposure to what kind of community-based research projects look like. So I'm really proud, especially of that student involvement portion, that we were able to make that happen. And we had a lot of great students, many at Alabama A&M University, Go Bulldogs. Thank you to all of them, some of them who I think are on this call, so special shout out. So a lot of people that were part of this, right, from the get-go. Okay, but let me keep moving because I know I've got a lot to get through today. So one last framing piece before I jump into what we found in our survey. The report uses this concept of job quality to evaluate and interpret our data. It's a term we've heard a few times already this morning, but I just want to kind of talk it through and explain how we're using it and why. So we think that job quality is a really useful framing because it takes into account this really diverse bundle of experiences and rewards that we receive when we show up to work, because work is a lot more than just a paycheck, right? We do a lot at work, we feel a lot at work, the way we're treated, all of those go into it. Now, various attempts have been made to kind of unify or systematize definitions and measures of quality, of job quality. And in this report specifically, we use 6 dimensions of job quality that were laid out by Warhurst, Wright, and Lionette back in a 2017 report. So these dimensions are pay and benefits, terms of employment, work-life balance, health and safety, representation and voice, and intrinsic characteristics. So as we look at these dimensions, it's pretty easy to understand why these might be important or valuable to workers, right? When we show up to work, we want to have good outcomes that are indicators on all of these things, right? But it's also worth mentioning that there's a growing body of evidence that high quality jobs are also good for business, right? There's a lot of work that is identifying links between job quality and productivity, job quality and innovation, and even job quality and firm survival, right? So links showing that as job quality increases, all those other indicators also do. So just to say, we can make a business case essentially, right, for improving job quality. The report goes into detail describing the importance and description of each dimension, so I won't do too much of that here, but I will just draw your attention to the table on the right here. So this is how we operationalize these concepts for our research. So we have the list of dimensions that I just rattled off, but then on the right, we have the specific measures that we use to assess each of these dimensions. So for example, we assess that first dimension of job quality, which is pay and benefits, by asking 2 things. One, are manufacturing jobs paying what would be considered a family-sustaining living wage? And then 2, are they offering health insurance, right? So these 2 things together gave us an indication of pay and benefits, right? So those are the measures we used to assess that first dimension. So for all these subsequent dimensions, we can see the other measures that we used. In the interest of time, I won't go through these now because they'll come up again as I scroll through the results. But you can see that's kind of how we approach this analysis, is linking specific measures back to the dimensions. And for each of these measures, sorry, I should just point out, there are specific survey questions that are lined up with each of these. So that's how we answered the question, by aligning the survey question to the measure back to the dimension. It's a lot of layers there, but it's all laid out in the report, I promise. Okay, so let's get into the good bits, right? The kind of, so what did we learn? What did we find? So in all, we got just over 1,300 workers who took the survey. We have some of the basic demographics listed here on the slide. And again, what we're talking about here is everyone across, right? So these are workers that are living and working in either Alabama or Mississippi in manufacturing facilities. And the results, again, what we're going to do is talk through each of these 6 dimensions of job quality, and kind of assess, were the survey responses indicating that we were meeting these minimum standards for job quality or not. And, spoiler alert, the summary table here shows that there's some room for improvement, right? We're doing okay in some areas, right? But there's areas where we're not meeting things even a bit. So let's go through and I'll try to kind of explain what I'm talking about a bit more. Okay. Yep. Pay and benefits, right? Back to the first and kind of most fundamental dimension, the one we most think about when we think about the quality of work or the quality of jobs, excuse me. So the results from the data on our first dimension, overall, we kind of deem are partially met, and you can see the breakdown for each measure in the top corner. And that'll be the same format that is used for the subsequent dimensions. That's why I'm pointing it out. So the high level takeaway here for pay and benefits is that average reported pay is pretty decent, right? And these jobs are often some of the best paid in the region. But however, there's pretty significant racial wage gaps reported, and the average wage, it still doesn't meet what we would consider necessary to support a family. So let me give some examples of how we got there. The report uses the family living wage calculator from the team at MIT as a benchmark for good pay. And in 2019, when we started our data collection, they estimated that it would take $26.46 an hour to support a family of 3 in Alabama and Mississippi. So we then compared that to what we found in our survey data. So the average reported hourly wage among manufacturing workers in our data is $21 an hour. So that's pretty significantly, right? That's $5 an hour less than that family minimum wage or minimum living wage. So that's right. $21 is still pretty decent, but it's not that family sustaining. Furthermore, 20% of our respondents were earning actually less than that $15 an hour threshold, which we hear a lot of talk about, right? So average was 21 and another 20% were earning less than 15. We then looked at averages across race and gender and found pretty substantial wage gaps. So women reported earning $4.48 less per hour than men, and Black workers reported earning on average $3.84 less per hour than white workers. Now, this doesn't take into account issues such as longevity or classification, but they're the averages, and we think they're still maybe potentially indicative of some challenges here, some specifically equity challenges. And since this is the first time breaking out results by race, I just want to highlight that we know our communities are not only Black and white, but our data set was predominantly was. So we did not have enough respondents from other racial or ethnic groups to be able to pull them out on their own, right? So we didn't have enough Latinx or APPI respondents to be able to present those independently. So that's why our data is, and the story that we're able to tell today is much more a story of white workers and Black and African American workers. Okay, but back to pay and benefits. So the second measure for this dimension is about healthcare. And healthcare was widely offered and utilized, although respondents were a bit split on assessing the quality of these plans, whether they thought it was good or bad. So overall, what we thought was that average wages, right, are below what would be considered the livable standard for a family of 3, but there's still some of the better paying jobs in the area. And these have become something of golden handcuffs for some workers, as is illustrated by some of these quotes here that we have from the survey. We had some open-ended questions. So one worker wrote that for the area, it's the best pay and benefits that I'm aware of. And another wrote that, they pay you enough knowing they can't find that type of base pay anywhere else in the tri-state area. And then they treat you the way they want because they know you'll probably take it, right? So that when there's not more options, right, that challenge of feeling maybe stuck. Okay, terms of employment is our second dimension. So we have, again, 2 measures for this dimension of terms of employment. The first is, are people hired directly by the company or through a temporary agency? And the second is, are there opportunities for career advancement, right? Otherwise, we might consider some of these dead-end jobs. So again, on these metrics, our results are mixed for this dimension. We expected it actually to be there to be, we expected there to be more widespread use of temporary work schemes because we know it's prevalent in related industries. So it surprised us to learn actually that most of our respondents are direct hires. We did observe some differences based on the race and gender of respondents, with white and male workers being less likely to be a temporary employee or employed through a temporary agency. The second measure is about promotion and career advancement. Respondents here were divided with roughly equal amounts saying that they did or did not have opportunities for advancement at their job. So taken together, we concluded that although most jobs were permanent, relatively few reported opportunities for upward career mobility. So this was kind of, we deemed partially met because it was mixed. Okay, work-life balance is another important dimension of job quality. And I think particularly if we're thinking through community and family life, work-life balance really shines as a significant one. Work-life balance is important because we can then balance the demands of jobs with the demands of personal life, family life, particularly caring for children. But what we found is that for many of our respondents, work-life balance is virtually non-existent. They're putting in really long shifts with highly variable and difficult to predict schedules, right? So we can probably already predict how that would complicate lives for working families. So the hours worked in many of these facilities are long. 45% of our respondents are working between 41 and 50 hours a week. And another 19% are working more than 51 hours in a week. So those are long weeks, right? Long out, a lot of hours to put in a single week. Especially this is work that is often physically straining, right? Nearly a third of our respondents reported that their schedules are not fixed, but instead they change from week to week, and often with very little advance notice. So for those who did have a changing work schedule, 42% received just a few hours of advance notice, right? So that can leave parents scrambling to try to sort out pickups and grocery runs when your work schedule changes and you only have a couple hours to make your adjustment. Dissatisfaction with working hours was highlighted in a lot of our open-ended responses, such as this worker here who wrote that, quote, used to be 3 8-hour shifts, and now there are 2 10.5-hour shifts. I work 6 days a week and hardly have any family time. Yes, I make more money, but we're all exhausted, and none of my coworkers are happy at all. Everyone with a family feels trapped. So it really is underscoring, right, the implications of what does it mean when work-life balance isn't there. Health and safety. The health and safety of workers, so the provision of safe working environments and the psychological health and safety of workers, which would include environments that are free from harassment and discrimination, is our fourth dimension of job quality. Our survey did find high rates of serious injury and reports of racially hostile and sexually harassing work environments. So on both measures, this was unmet. So there were high rates of injury reported among our respondents. 20% reported being seriously injured while at work. And just for context, the national average in manufacturing, according to the CDC, is less than 7%. A third of our respondents reported witnessing production practices that put workers at risk. And this could range from things like the production line moving too quickly for workers to keep up, insufficient staffing for a task, trip hazards, exhaustion, and so on, right? So a third of respondents reported witnessing issues like that. Another component of health and well-being, right, is how workers are treated at work. And that this is where we talk through our findings about racial discrimination. So here again, the survey results indicate that manufacturing jobs are falling short of what could be, right? They're falling short on this job quality indicator. More than half of Black workers reported that racial discrimination is a problem at their job. And of this, a quarter reported that's a, quote, big problem. The two most commonly reported experiences of racial discrimination that were reported by workers are receiving less support from management and being treated as if you're not competent because of your race. So that's health and safety, both measures, right, falling short. Representation and voice is our fifth measure. So while unions provide traditional means of both worker representation and voice, and that's what the academic literature largely is focused on, The relatively low unionization rates mean that this report used other measures of voice and representation. What we looked at was the experiences and feelings about filing complaints without fears of retaliation, right? So fear of reporting would be a way of silencing workers. So that's how we approached this particular dimension. And what we did find is that fear of retaliation from employers is preventing workers from using their voice and speaking up, even if it would improve practices, right, at work. And so despite the high injury rates that we noted previously, right, few workers felt safe speaking to their managers about these safety concerns. Among those who had witnessed a safety problem at work, 72% said they did not feel they could report these issues to their managers, right? So that's a lot of issues going unreported, even safety issues. We also looked and asked if individuals had filed a formal complaint, either at work or with an outside agency like OSHA. Between a fifth and a quarter had filed a formal complaint in the previous 12 months. And half of the remaining respondents, though, said they felt they had a valid reason to file a complaint, but chose not to. So when we asked why they chose not to speak up or file that complaint, the top reasons provided were they didn't think it would make a difference if they filed a complaint. They were afraid of losing their job if they filed a complaint. And they observed that other coworkers had been disciplined, either by being fired, threatened, or treated badly when they had spoken up. So I think this last point is summed up in the words of one respondent who wrote that, quote, employees don't have a voice. We all be afraid to speak up for fear of reprimand or losing jobs. The last piece is the intrinsic nature of work, the last dimension. And this is that sense of meaning or purpose that workers derive from their everyday job. And we found that many workers expressed a sense of pride in their work, but for some, that pride was tempered by stories of unfair or mistreatment by their employers. So just over half, 51%, reported that they are proud to be working for their current employer. And the open-ended responses provided a bit of insight into those who have pride and those who said they did not. So one simply wrote that they're just really proud to be working for such a marquee company, they quote, a major Fortune 500 company. Another wrote that they feel worked at an automotive facility and wrote that they felt pride knowing that what they did mattered, and as they built cars safely and then saw them driving down the road, they took a sense of pride in that. But others expressed the loss of pride or disappointments that might set in as they experienced mistreatment at work. So there was this respondent who wrote in, quote, when I first began, I enjoyed my job and I was proud to be at my job. Now, after situations, discrimination for being female among a couple to name, I almost hate going there. So this is our data on job quality, right? This is our final dimension, intrinsic characteristics. And I just want to pause here and remind us of where we started. We started at pay and benefits and went through all of these. And it's just, I think, a reminder of why it's so important to consider more than just pay when we think about jobs, because all these other factors are things that we experience at work and really have a serious implication for how we feel as workers and how we're able to engage with our families and communities. So I'm wary of the time, so I'm going to try to speed up and just briefly talk through some of our community survey responses and highlight a few points here, because I think it provides some important context to the issues of job quality that we just talked through. So in our report, we present survey results from 191 residents to try to understand and get a glimpse of the experiences and potentially unmet needs of those that are living in manufacturing communities. So I won't go into every aspect here, but the summary table on the slide is examined in great detail in the report. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to highlight a couple relevant points related to both employment and the economy. So employment. So given the expectation that I talked about at the top of this session about the idea that investing in firm recruitment through incentives would bring a return in the form of jobs, I want to highlight what we learned about employment opportunity from our community survey. So remember, these are individuals who aren't working in the manufacturing facilities, but would live in the area, right? The catchment area probably for employment. The first two indicators listed here ask if respondents agree that, quote, people can get decent work and that, quote, jobs are available in the community. So we can see that more than half agreed with both statements. But in the report, what we do is we also break this down by the race of the respondent and found some discrepancies or some gaps. We found that white respondents were much more likely to agree with this statement than Black respondents. Roughly 40% of Black respondents agreed with this compared to 66% of white respondents, right? A significant gap there. When asked if they thought that jobs were open to all qualified people, regardless of background, right? Race, sex, age, and so on. We again saw a really significant gap. So 33%, 1/3 of Black respondents agreed, compared to 71% of white respondents. So that's a 37 percentage point gap in the perspectives on job availability and access. So as we're thinking about the jobs that we're creating through these public programs, right, thinking about who feels that they actually have access to these jobs is important. The additional set of indicators I'll mention from our community survey are some of things about local economies and how individuals and households are doing. When we look at these 4 indicators, right, that people in my neighborhood have the opportunity to make a good life, they have enough money to get by, families can meet their needs, and that children and families have decent food and clothing, right? These are fairly essential elements, right? And we can see in the number of people that agreed some challenges, right? Especially when we're looking at the middle two for people or families having enough money to meet their needs, right? We're less than 1/3 of all respondents that are agreeing. So it's a bit, right, that's hard, that's grim, but it's also, right, probably reflects a lot of the reality that we know. So there were significant gaps in our responses here, though, again, based on the race of the respondent. So for example, families have enough money to get by. So 38% of white respondents agreed or strongly agreed, compared to just 19% of Black respondents. And neither is very high, right? It's not great for anybody here, but the gap is an indication that Black families were struggling or witnessing that struggle to a greater degree than their white neighbors. And I think that all of this is important context, again, because it helps us to understand some of the needs in our communities and some of those trade-offs that are occurring when we choose to invest in things like tax incentives and firm recruitment and not in other areas. So I'll wrap up by briefly considering what's next or where do we go from here. So the results from the survey present a lot of challenges, but I think there's also some important opportunities that are in here. So possible future directions that are highlighted in the report, right, talk about ways that we can actually improve job quality, right? It's been done before, it can be done again, right? Part of it is enforcing existing labor laws. Others are about creating incentives for businesses to upgrade practice. We can work to improve our access to employment and ensure that that access is equitable, right? We can ensure that local workforces have the skills necessary to get those jobs and possibly even work on matching programs to link job seekers to employers. We can work to ensure that communities benefit from community investment, right? So ensure that any use of publicly funded incentives include guarantees about the job quality of those jobs that will be created and the community investment. And if that can't happen through local agencies, community benefits agreements may provide a path. And, thinking through how can we avoid a race to the bottom where we can limit the competition between jurisdictions about offering larger and larger incentive packages in order to recruit and retain firms, right? If we're creating too much competition, we end up giving away the kitchen sink and having less to hold back and keep. So I'll end here and include a shameless plug to check out the report available online, pictured here. And with that, I will stop sharing and pass it back to my lovely co-author, Dr. Herbert, who will help transition us into the next phase. So thank you.
Thank you so very much, Emily. The reality is that this was a major piece to be able to conduct this research during COVID, conducted research to all of the different obstacles that she and her team had. So we really appreciate it. And some of the results may seem a little grim, but I'm thinking that this is an opportunity for us to talk about some of these and figure out where we go from here. So what I'm gonna do at this point in time, so based on your program, we are at the panel discussion phase. We have 6 panelists. 1 panelist going to be virtual and 5 panelists are here with us today. What I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna briefly introduce them, and for the next 45-50 minutes or so, I'm gonna be asking them some questions to stir a discussion. Then during that time, I'm hoping that everybody has small cards, index cards and a pen. You can actually take your question, put your question, and I'm gonna go get one of my students to grab the questions from you. And in the question and answer session, we'll be able to answer some of what your interests are. So at this point in time, let me go ahead and open it up to introduce the panelists. But one thing before, I really wanted to say welcome to those individuals online. From what I'm understanding, we have 70 plus individuals joining us online. And I would love for each individual online, if you guys would just drop your name in the chat so that we can get a good sense. We have
The chat's not enabled.
the chat's not enabled. Okay, so we gotta figure out a way in which we can know who you are. I know you registered, but we'll figure it out. But thank you guys so very much. So, and just for half a second, we were a little concerned about our numbers and so forth, but we are so very appreciative for you guys coming in face-to-face person and for you joining us online. So let me go ahead and get started with the introduction of my panelists. And so I'm not gonna go on the order that we have it on the program. I'm gonna go on the order that we have it. So I just don't want the confusion, okay? So I'm gonna start with Bob. All right, Robert, that is. So Bob. Bob at my far left is a professor emeritus of public policy at Duke. Bob is first and foremost a historian, and his academic training and career has focused on African American and labor history in the United States. He received his undergraduate and PhD from the University of North Carolina and lives in Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome today, Bob.
Thank you.
Next, we have Sanchione Butler, and I've been hearing some amazing things about her, and I would love to be able to contact afterwards. So she is currently the American Rescue Plan Coordinator for the Mississippi Association of Educators, where she travels the state to make sure our public schools are getting and using the ARP funds to improve the education environment for our children and educators. Sanchione was born and raised in the South. She spent nearly 2 decades on the shop floor, working in southern manufacturing facilities in Dallas and Memphis. She spent an additional 10 years talking to thousands of workers across the South, including here in Mississippi, educating them about their workplace rights, including the right to form a union. Welcome, Sanchione. Next to Sanchione, and I'm going to jump over there, is Miss Erica E. Henry. And I have to pause for a moment. This young lady, it's amazing how things come full circle. She was a student of mine. And now she's my boss. Yes, is the sponsor along with Kellogg Foundation. They're the sponsor for this particular event and research. So I really want to say a special welcome to her. And then we also have her colleague in the building. His name is Devia. And Devia was also a student of mine. So it's quite interesting. So Erica is the co-executive director for Jobs to Move America. And that's a major position. And she got it recently, and I really want to congratulate her on that. So Erica's hometown is Birmingham, and she received her undergraduate and master's degree from Alabama A&M University under Moore. Before becoming the co-executive director of GMA, she led GMA's work in the South, which focused on improving job quality in manufacturing industry. So welcome, Erica. All right, so I'm going to jump over to, my papers all over the place now. Who am I going to make? Okay. Go ahead.
Dave.
Dave.
Or David.
find you, Dave. I can't find you on my paper, Dave. Okay, here we go. I found it. So Dave. Okay. Dave is an associate professor of history and social science at Louisiana Tech University. He has researched Southern workers in foreign-owned factories since 1980. He received his PhD from, you guessed it, the University of North Carolina. Welcome, Dave. All right, next we have Scott. So Scott Douglas III is the executive director of the Greater Birmingham Ministries, an interfaith multiracial organization that provides emergency services to families in economic crisis, while assisting low-income families empowering themselves and their communities through organizing based upon participatory, transparent, and democratically accountable inclusion. Scott is a native of Nashville, Tennessee, and initially worked in an aircraft assembly manufacturing plant. He lived in Birmingham since 1976. Now, my last participant is Dr. Valerie Walson, and she should be online, if you can find her. So Valerie is the director of the Economic Policy Institute, the program on race, ethnicity, and the economy. Valerie received her PhD in economics from the University of North Carolina, as was Dave. And she has written extensively on various issues impacting economic inequality in the United States, including a report last year on understanding Black and white disparities in the labor market, the outcomes and the requirements of the model that account for persistent discrimination and unequal bargaining power. So welcome to our panelists, and if you would give them a round of applause. So this is the setup for the next 45 minutes or so. I'm going to ask each one of them a question. We're going to do 2 rounds. And they are going to respond to the question. So I'm going to go individually. They're going to respond to the questions. We're going to do this twice. Then afterwards, so Marquesa is giving you some cards. Please feel free to put your questions on the card, and she's going to pick them up and pass them to me during the question and answer session. So we are going to begin. Okay. So, you know, when you take a line and stuff, right? And then you're trying to put them back together. So that. Okay. Let me try my question. My first question goes to Bob. So Bob, as someone who has studied U.S. history your entire career, can you give us some historical context for the first time? And we're going to have the panelists, let's just stand there, please, and give them the question.
Okay, thank you very much. And thanks to everyone at Jackson State for welcoming us here and hosting this event. It's very nice to be here, and thanks to all the people who work on the report. I did a review of the draft of this earlier in the year, or I guess like the end of last year, and some of my comments were just how wonderfully written a report it was, and how clear and precise the results of the various types of social science research that's done. I thought it was the model of this kind of, and also as I see it in its final phase with graphics and stuff like that, it's quite an amazing piece of work. One of the things I said in my comments was that how familiar so many of the stories of the workers that they interviewed sounded to me. I've been doing this kind of work for 45 years and have done hundreds of interviews with workers, primarily in textile, tobacco, furniture in the Carolinas, but also directed an oral history project looking at African American life in the Jim Crow South, in which we interviewed people all over the South, including workers in steel plants and chicken factories and fish farms and a lot of other places around the region. And, you know, I think in ways you could have done these surveys at any time over the last 150 years. And unfortunately, a lot of the comments would have been similar. They wouldn't have been the same, but they would have had a lot of similarity. And this doesn't, of course, mean that things haven't changed. The rigid social and gender divisions of labor that existed in the past are mostly gone, although discrimination, as we see in this report, is of many kinds is still a major issue for a lot of workers. Manufacturing workers have health benefits now, although not enough, and they cost too much. Their working conditions are somewhat better, but you know, as we can see, an awful lot of people are getting injured on the job, and these are in pretty good plants and manufacturing jobs. If you start looking in food processing and service work and agriculture work, the numbers are actually much higher. So what is that story over the last 150 years or so? Or what are the kind of themes that show up in the history that I do and a lot of what's coming out here? One is the relatively low wages of workers in the South. And those have been tied historically to the poverty wages that were paid agricultural workers and domestic workers. A large percentage of those who were African American. So the manufacturing wage has always been geared to the wage of the lowest wage workers in the country, and that's still true, I think, in this case. And we're talking about not agricultural workers so much, but service workers and food processing workers who are, you know, many of whom are barely making minimum wage, which is, you know, ridiculous. So low wages has been a constant theme. Working conditions, nothing new here, whether it was agriculture, tobacco, textiles. Injuries, obviously one issue, but also chronic disease. Think about the textile industry and coal miners and lots of others where people, you know, work their whole lives, and then by the time they got time to retire, even before, they're suffering from diseases that take their lives at an early age. Benefits have always been an issue in the South, and until, you know, it's really in my lifetime that many companies pay benefits at all. I mean, one of the places I study, Reynolds Tobacco Company in Winston-Salem, they didn't start providing real health care, vacation pay, you know, anything like this until the late 1940s, after World War II and after the unionization of the factory. And in other industries, it lagged even further behind that. Another characteristic is the continuous opposition of employers to unionization or to organization or mobilization of their workers of whatever kind. And this has been true whether they're down home people or whether they come from Europe or Asia. The attitudes have been pretty much the same. And finally, I think another thing that we need to think a lot more about, I may say something about this later when we talk about the future, is just looking at the way in which state and local politicians and administrators have played a decisive role in limiting the opportunities for organization, but also providing benefits for workers, particularly ones in manufacturing and other areas. And everything from right to work laws, the use of, and this was pretty notorious in North Carolina in particular, the use of police and the sheriff and the state patrol to break strikes, low minimum wage and employment benefits in North Carolina, which has been the kind of the largest manufacturing state in the country at one point, had the largest percentage of its workforce involved in manufacturing. It's not true anymore, but it was maybe 30 years ago. A low minimum wage that barely, you know, keeps up. Obviously, it has to keep up for the most part with the national wage. and really lack of a lot of unemployment benefits. And our General Assembly in the last 10 years has gotten even worse on these kind of issues. So again, the final thought here is a lot's changed, but a lot looks very similar.
Thanks, Bob, and thanks for that historical context. We're gonna go over to Sanchioli. So as a person that has worked in southern manufacturing environment, albeit a unionized one, and spent many years talking to thousands of non-unionized manufacturing workers, can you give us an underground perspective of the report findings from your perspective?
I want to get off of Bob. Thanks, Ms. Dr. Perkins for having us and JMH. And just also I'm thankful that I was asked to lend my voice to the conversation. There's a couple of things that stood out for me in regards to the survey that I want to kind of piggyback off of regarding some of the comments from Bob, which is the pay. Unions are making a presence in the South, and because these manufacturing companies know that unions are out there, I think I look at it as if they raise the pay between the $15 to $21 an hour starting wage to try to keep workers from forming a union. So that's one component of it. And the other piece, when they talk about healthcare, most of these companies, the healthcare packages are very expensive for workers. And if you're looking at a person within a household of 3 to 4 folks or a single mom, most of these premiums are running anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 per person for the deductibles. And then they pay premiums. Well, I'm saying the deductible, but their premiums usually come out of their payroll checks. And so if you look at that, a lot of people have to possibly, if they take this insurance and have family coverage, obtain a part-time job to try to supplement, because what they're paying out of their payroll checks, we say 15 to 21, but in fact, it actually goes back down to around that $89 an hour wage because of what they're paying out of their payroll checks. So again, a lot of these people are forced to get part-time jobs to supplement that. And the other piece, as far as the intimidation, you have, I'll just say for single moms that's in the workforce that are being sexually harassed, the fear of speaking out against that, that's the only income in the household. And so when these factories come into these towns, people are excited because they know that it's an opportunity to provide a better life for their children and to maybe get a better home, to have more of a reliable transportation, so that what holds them back for speaking up and advocating on their own behalf is fear of losing what they're trying to build for their family. So, those were two of the main things that stuck out for me in the report, as well as the balance of work-family life. Again, the report said that you have companies that the shifts are changing, and then you're being asked to work past your 8-hour shift sometimes, or past that 10 hours, trying to scramble to get childcare for your child. Who's gonna pick your kid up from school? So those things are real. I've had the privilege of talking to workers who were brave enough to share some of their personal experiences in their work life. So.
Thanks so very much for sharing. It becomes more real when we actually hear these type of issues from people who've been through these processes themselves. So we do appreciate your perspective. So I'm going to jump to Erica. So Erica, as the co-director of a national organization whose mission it is to improve job quality, particularly among companies that receive government subsidies or provide goods or services to public agencies, how are the findings of this report useful to your efforts to improve job quality?
Okay, so first I wanted to say, thank you, JFU, for having us on your grounds. To the Bulldog and JFU Alliance happening right now. Our homecomings and our games against the devil is magnificent. JMA, we seeded this project because, our goal as an organization is to create good jobs in the green manufacturing space. Because we look at this new type of economy, this green economy, we want to make sure that good jobs come with those green jobs. And so what we were missing was an absence of information and research about what was the experience of the Southern worker in the manufacturing space. And, speaking from a personal space, growing up in Birmingham, Alabama, Black home, inner city, we always talk about what it's like to have a job. We always talk about the struggles we experience on the job, but it's always what we feel. It's always like, just feels like something ain't right about it. And in these manufacturing spaces, these are actually considered the good jobs. These are the jobs because they pay more than the traditional job in the South. They're considered a good job. Because they do offer benefits, they're considered a good job. But what this report does is it really lays the foundation of the definition of a good job. It goes beyond the bread and butter of what a good job is, of benefits and pay. It really looks at the holistic experience of a worker. A job is not just about how much you paid and what type of benefits you make. What is your quality of life? And this report really looks at quality of life in a holistic view. Looking at working conditions, looking at health and safety, looking at, time and flexibility and hours. Like, these are things that we have to consider when we think about a good job. And the only way we can get to good jobs is that we understand what the true issues are. And what this report does is it tells us what people are experiencing. And what's also interesting about this report is that, there's no really empirical data that really kind of demonstrates the Black experience in America when it comes to being in a manufacturing workspace. This report actually lays the foundation. What I hope to see happen from this report is that other scientists, other social scientists, like Dr. Corbett said, this is a model. Other social scientists see this report and pick it up and take it to the next level. Because the truth is, out there in the southern region, are people really looking at what it's like in these plants? Are people really looking at the worker experience in a deep way? We have to really understand the conditions in order to be able to improve them. And Jobs for New America and other organizations that are thinking about creating these jobs and for workers, not only in the South, but across America, not just for Black people, but for all people. We need the basis of understanding to be able to make the case. We need the basis of understanding to be able to really advocate for policy. We need the basis of understanding to really, help build these communities around these companies that are employing these workers. And in the absence of this report, we're only going on gut and assumption. Now we have evidence that people are feeling the pressure of working in places where I love that quote, golden handcuffs. Like, you're paid good, but you're stuck. Like, how can you really be free and be a contributor to your community and society if you're chained to a job that you might get hurt at, you might get discriminated against at, you might get harassed at? That is not life. That is not America that we want to see. We want to see America where people are proud to go to work. I'm happy to see that these people are proud to go to work, but then to be disenchanted because somebody grabs you on your butt, this is not America that we need. And I think this report really sets the foundation for us to really be able to have some real conversations and really figure out how do we work with these companies and get into community and partnership to be able to work together to create good jobs in America. Not only in green manufacturing spaces, but setting the standard for all jobs in America.
Thank you so very much. It's very great to see an individual, someone is very young, female, Black, who's in charge of a national organization that has this type of passion. Because this is the type of passion that's going to make a difference for our communities. So I'm going to go to Valerie next, and Valerie is one of our participants who are virtual. So Valerie, given your education and working career as an economist, what can you tell about the broader national trends that help provide the context for the results of the report?
Well, good afternoon, and thank you, Dr. Herbert, and others who organized this event for inviting me to participate. I want to echo the remarks of my fellow panelists and congratulating you all on producing such a wonderful report. I think it makes an important contribution to our understanding of job quality beyond just the commonly measured economic outcomes of pay and benefits. The report does a great job of describing some of the push and pull factors and incentives used to attract manufacturing jobs to the South. But I also want to talk about manufacturing employment in the larger context of globalization and US botched policy response to growing global competition that I think influenced a lot of what we see in terms of the composition of jobs and the movement of many of these jobs to the American South, particularly for workers without a four-year college degree, which, by the way, is roughly 2/3 of the US labor force. And then I will talk a bit about some of primarily the economic value of manufacturing jobs relative to jobs in other industries for similarly educated workers for the purpose of looking at the specific measures in the report in terms of pay and how that sort of stacks up nationally. So the first point I want to make about globalization and its impact: between 1998 and 2019, we lost nearly 5 million manufacturing jobs in the United States, and about 70,000 manufacturing plants closed in that time. That was largely the result of unfair trade practices with a number of foreign countries and overvaluation of the US dollar, which had the effect of making US goods more expensive than goods produced overseas. So this led to rapidly growing imports of manufactured products and failure really to grow demand for things that were produced here in the United States to offset that demand. Many of those jobs obviously moved overseas where labor was cheaper, but they also moved to the South where labor is also relatively cheaper than it was in the Midwest or the Northeast. A growing competition with lower wage workers in other countries like China and Mexico in particular had a major impact on the downward pressure on wages in the manufacturing industry, but also across the economy for workers with similar skills and education. Now, looking at what happened in terms of the wages in manufacturing relative to the service industry in particular, because at the same time that manufacturing jobs went overseas, nearly all of the jobs that were created to fill that gap in the United States were in the service industry and were lower wage jobs in the service industry. And so when we compare average wages and benefits in manufacturing compared to the service industry in 2021 in particular, on average, the average hourly wage in manufacturing was $40.71. I think we're right now. See, working moms, right? $40.71 in the manufacturing industry, which was about 13.9% higher than service industries. Benefits in particular are much higher in the manufacturing industry compared to service. The dollar value of manufacturing benefits is about $10.78 an hour compared to $7.61 an hour in the service industry. So we're looking at about 42% higher value of benefits. This is important both for the typical or median worker, so those sort of in the middle of the income distribution, as well as the lower paid workers in these industries. Across all racial and ethnic groups, you find that workers earn more in manufacturing compared to what similarly educated workers would earn outside of the manufacturing industry. So not just specifically compared to service, but if we look at average wages in all other non-manufacturing industries compared to manufacturing, we see that these jobs are still relatively better paid than in other sectors of the economy. This holds up, as I said, across racial and ethnic lines, but also for women tend to find higher pay and benefits in manufacturing compared to other industries. Now, that sort of tells you how manufacturing jobs stack up to jobs in other industries, but there are other things that are important to consider that I think the report really draws out. And that includes the racial and gender equity issues that we find within the manufacturing sector, as well as throughout the economy, as well as the issue of not just comparing a manufacturing job to another kind of job, but really thinking about the overall adequacy of the pay and benefits for supporting a decent standard of living for families who work in those industries. The other point I want to make about manufacturing, and historically its significance for racial equity in particular, is that these jobs are really important to narrowing racial wage gaps in the Midwest when the Midwest had a booming manufacturing economy. But that was primarily because of the high unionization rates. In 1980, the Midwest had the lowest Black-white wage gaps in the nation. As we fast forward, and many of those jobs were sent overseas, or some of those kinds of jobs relocated to the South, we find that those Black-white wage gaps in the Midwest look more like they do in the South. And historically, the South has had the largest Black-white wage gaps. So again, we can compare manufacturing to service or compare manufacturing to non-manufacturing jobs, but these broader issues of quality and equity are really left unaddressed by those kinds of comparisons. And I think that's one of the important contributions of the report.
Thank you, Valerie, for providing that economic context of our, for the report. What I'm gonna have to do is just, things a little bit, if you guys don't mind, because we have 2 rounds of questions, and I don't want to keep the participants and you guys way beyond the time that we promised. So, not that I'm gonna put too much pressure on you, Sorry, Dave and Scott, I'm hoping that I don't put too much pressure on you guys. So let me go. Let me go to Scott first.
That's for sure.
All right, so Scott, as the leader of a large community organization that focuses on empowering low-income families, are you surprised by the lack of job mobility in the southern manufacturing facilities?
Thank you very much for the question, and I'll try to reduce the pressure. That is, I know I'm not surprised. Since the Confederacy, the South has been a place, since the end of Reconstruction, the South has been a place of discounted values, structural discounted values, structural discounted human rights, structural discounted workers' rights in the context of the United States. Alabama and Mississippi tend to be bookend states at the bottom. If you fold us on the border, it's like a book cover. The border is straight with rugged edges on each side. With a lot of light. And actually, Alabama's racial justice problems are structural in nature, involving working people and Black people in particular. And I can't blame it all on Alabama from their 1901 Constitution, in which the founder of that president, that convention said, when asked, why are you having a 6th Constitution? He said, why, sir, to establish white supremacy by law, unquote. He was clear. And the Constitution we adopted in 1901 is based on the 1890 Mississippi Plan. So we are related. Thirdly, the Jim Crow laws were instituted, well known, involved everything, including convict labor, free from slavery, but convict labor for incumbent industries at the time. Matter of fact, we got something going on right now. We'll talk about that later. And other pieces, and underfunded education. In the populist time of the Black-white relationships in the late 1890s, the populist movement, demonstrators were actually shot and killed for demonstrating the main thing that the poor white and poor Blacks agreed upon, and that was free public transportation, education, to be paid for by the high-tech industry of that day, the railroads. And people were shot dead at demonstrations in front of Tallapoosa County and Montgomery County in Alabama coming together. And guess what? Why do poor white people who are Black people don't work more together? Well, when grandma and granddad tried to get killed, fear is also a mobilizing factor. And no, the last thing I'll say about the quality of life, period, is that when new companies come to the South, they come here, thanks for information about what's happening in the widening black-white wage gap in the Midwest, because I had figured all along it was the closing of the gap that a lot of unionized companies in the South, in the Midwest did not do. But when it came to the South, they have widened it by reinforcing the gaps, by observing Southern culture and plantation politics. And and the poor worker had this to fight against. One was the company, the other was on state government. And her own good stuff. So I just conclude by saying, no, I'm not surprised. And I do think racism is not the same place it was several decades ago, but it mutates. So our struggle must grow and develop as well.
That context, the constitutional context and structural issues are quite valid, and we really appreciate you presenting that forward. So we're gonna go for the last question for this one, Dave. So you said your area of study is in history of foreign manufacturing companies coming into the South, and it overlaps very nicely with this worker-centered first-hand account quality. So how does the report findings fit into your specific work?
Well, first, I want to thank you, and especially Dr. Erickson and Dr. Herbert. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, should be commended for this insightful, informative report. I opened it, I was going to say, well, I've done all this research on this, but everything in this report confirms and actually extends my own research. And I've written an article with my colleague Andrew McKevitt about workers and about especially foreign factories in the American South. I would just recommend turn to page 4 and 5 in your pamphlet, and you get an excellent summary. And just what Erica said about, we have empirical evidence now of what's been an ongoing historical research project, not by myself. There's a new book by Timothy Minchin called America's Other Automobile Makers. And this is about these foreign-owned factories that have been coming in. And I think, like Dr. Wilson said, that we had this period of deindustrialization throughout the United States and even in the South as well. And this was overlapped by this new period of industrialization where the states of the South have turned recruitment of foreign-owned factories into an art form. And they have offices in foreign countries. This not only is at the state level, but this is at the county and the local level. I mean, some places like Huntsville, Alabama, are masters at this, and they just recruited recently the Mazda and Toyota plant. Now, as the report points out, the promise of these foreign plants is upward mobility. They're going to improve these communities. They're going to raise workers' lives. And this is a pathway to the middle class. And in return, these states and localities are giving them tons of money, to the point they're even taxing the people that they're going to get jobs to. And we're talking about billions of dollars in incentives, tax abatement, and free property. And again, that's fine if they're going to deliver on what they promise. Now, there's not much evidence that some of these communities are benefiting, especially for the existing working class. And, you know, so one challenge is the possibility of affecting this process as it occurs, that these plans should deliver on what they promise. Now, as the report points out, these are the best jobs around in these communities. Why? Because these companies have turned it into a science about exactly where they want to place these plants. And for them, they need plants in the United States. They want to reach the American consumer market, especially automobiles or things like copper tubing that they ship to air conditioning companies and that. They have to have plants here. And so what they look for is communities that are in distress. And especially when they're near a big city or near a college town. They pick these with scientific precision. And they want to, you know, if you want to go back to history, you know, they're looking for workers, and we can see with the history of enslavement or Jim Crow, that they want to look for workers who have what? No power and no leverage. Those for them are the perfect workers. They don't want workers with unions. They don't want workers with political power. And so, you know, in fact, some plants don't even want workers. These new textile plants that they're talking about putting in Arkansas, to sew shirts have robots. That for them is their perfect worker. But the next is a worker with no political power and leverage. And just let me add one more thing here. The workers in these plants have delivered. They work hard. These companies aren't complaining that these plants aren't profitable. They're doing their job. You know, they even say they have pride to work in these places. Yeah, you know, it takes a family, you know, parents just to get a middle class, both of them working, to get a middle class life with subpar health insurance, with dangerous working conditions, especially in the auto parts plants in southeast Alabama and southwest Georgia. They're fast working, they're dangerous plants to work in. And so the blame here should not go on these workers who, you know, every day wake up and bring it to the workplace. If anything, the recruitment process has to deliver on what it's promising. And the state leaders and political leaders, if they're not going to allow unionization, at least uphold their end of the bargain. Because the people who are the ones who put in those more than 8 hours a day, every day. And so that's the challenge with this.
Thank you very much. So, you know, that's an important context for us because we see these plans here in this country, but in terms of where these plans come from, you know, what are their expectations, what's their legal rules, and is their profit driven, and what do they do to our community? So thanks for that context. So I'm gonna be the timekeeper. So we have beside myself and here, it's 12:35. And what we're gonna try to do to get to this next round in the next 15 minutes or something like that. Okay, if we can manage that, because I really want an opportunity for individuals to ask me questions. So that's one. And then also remember, at the end of it, we're gonna have an opportunity to do a lunch so that people can get an opportunity still to mingle and talk some more, because it's fantastic. So Bob, any insights in terms of what additional research needs to be done at this point in time?
Yes, okay, so I'll be real quick. In terms of additional research that will, I think, expand the kinds of issues that we're talking about in some of the new directions. It seems to me workers have been most successful in the South when they combine the fight for workplace issues with the quest for political and social rights. I use a term in my book on tobacco workers that I call the title of the book is Civil Rights Unionism. And I think it conveys a kind of a concept that I'm talking about here is that you have to be politically engaged in the community if you want to do more in the workplace. The second thing is that wage work can't meet all the needs of manufacturing workers. No matter how good a company you're gonna work for, how much they're gonna pay you, that's not going to cover all the kinds of needs that individuals and families have. And that's where politics comes in again, is that we must have a vibrant social welfare state that provides access to equal opportunities in education and health and social insurance, just to name a few things. And I think both of those are areas in looking at the way that workers have merged both of these issues in the past is something that needs to be stressed and further research in the South.
Thank you, Bob. So, yes, we definitely love to take some opportunities to figure out what's next for us in terms of research. So, essentially, to the point, what role do you think your community can actually play in furthering some of what you've heard today in terms of bettering some of the dynamics?
I think,
Thank you.
what we need to do, two things, we need to do a better job of talking about unions. So that word scares so many people, but to de-escalate the fear. Teachers are a part of the union, our nurses are a part of the union. Our postal workers are a part of the union. Our NFL players are a part of it. And so you have all of these prestigious people in the field that they work. They have the ability to negotiate their working conditions. There's nothing wrong with that. And then the second piece, I just wanted to piggyback off of the gentleman that talked about the reason why the manufacturers come to our communities, the no power, the no leverage. For me, if I've got my community support, my community leaders, they have been versed on what it's like to work. This report is perfect to have roundtable discussions with them to talk about what it's like to work in the factories. And when workers make a decision that, okay, well, I think I want to have a seat at the table to talk about my health care, my hours that I work with my coworkers, the community supporting them will help them not be so afraid because the community understands what they're going through. So I think that those two things, if we could work towards making those things happen, that's a pathway for the quality of jobs to get better for these Southern workers.
Thanks, Anshuli. I do like the concept for that pathway that you specified. So we're gonna jump to Erica. So sometimes this type of research can make things seem grim. It highlights the area of poor job quality and reminds us of racial inequality. Given your experience with working with communities across the South, so there's reason to be hopeful. Can you talk about that in terms of where do we go from here from that national perspective?
Absolutely. Before I get started, I just want to, give a shout out to Kellogg for just believing in these HBCUs to pull out this type of report. And thank you for the professors, Dr. Anderson, Dr. Wilson, Dr. Corte, for just vetting this process. Like, there were a lot of thought leaders who touched this project that come from different angles that really, helped like just scientifically ironclad this project. And thank you to Ian for coordinating this thing and making it happen. I was just asking my child, because we spent my last time talking. But that's actually the hope, right? The hope is because of the absence that was here in this space, we have an opportunity to bring people together around a common issue or a common challenge that we've identified together and figure out how to work around it and resolve it, right? I think, recognizing that, Alabama and Mississippi has some of the highest poverty rates in the country, lowest pay in the country, but there's no lack of jobs, right? We have to figure out how do we balance these scales to where there's not a lack of jobs, but there are also good jobs. And so we have to figure out what tools will be available to be able to offset this imbalance. And I think, thinking about things like community benefits agreements. Community benefits agreements is just an agreement between a company and the community, right? So like, what if communities could get together and identify issues of, working in these spaces and bring it to the employer and say, hey, look, you're here. We appreciate the jobs that are here, but these are some of the things that we're struggling with being workers in this place, but also being a part of this community that we want to figure out how to come up with solutions together on, right? That's pretty much what a community benefits agreement is. We saw that happen with New Flyer workers over in Anderson, Alabama. It's the largest electric bus manufacturer in North America, now working with the community of Anderson, Alabama to figure out how do they deal with discrimination? How do they deal with safety in the workplace? How do they deal with giving access to workers who may not be able to be employed in those spaces? So one of the things about this report that we noticed is that, people who had some type of conviction or record felt like access to jobs were less likely for them, right? That's something that we have to figure out. Black workers felt like it was a little bit more difficult to get into these jobs than other respondents did. How do we create pathways? These companies are landing in the neighborhoods that these people reside in, but they're less likely to feel like they can get these jobs. So what are the pipelines for these jobs? We have to figure out, how do we get these companies to be held more accountable to, when they're gonna take billions of dollars from impoverished cities and states? What's the rate of return? What do the communities get in return? How are they investing back into the community? Okay, $10 billion since 1995 in Alabama, Mississippi, but at the same time, we have the highest poverty rates, like that's a problem. What is the investment back into the community? There has to be conditions on these resources and subsidies that we're giving these companies that has some type of commitment back to the community. It has to be put into the policies that are being set that determine how these resources are moving. Trillions of dollars are coming down from our federal government to our states and communities every day right now to transition our economy in the manufacturing space. Why not use this opportunity to create some type of federal policy that require companies to, add some type of labor standards to these contracts when they're signing them? Why not have companies sign USPPs or U.S. employment plans, which is pretty much a checklist that talks about wages and benefits in these companies and offer whatever they can bid for big government contracts. Like, we have to think about how do we use policy to help the people on the ground be able to get what they need in order to have a high quality of life, because at the end of the day, we are not going to be able to really flourish as a country until we address the issues of working conditions and worker experiences in America. I don't want to be back in slavery. We're building a whole new industry on top of old Jim Crow. So let's not let that happen. Let's take this as an opportunity to get these corporations to partner with us, partner with our communities, and let's have some dialogue to figure out, how do we fix this and how do we make it good?
Thanks, everybody. I wanted to partnerships, pathways, policies and people. So amazing. All right, so we are going to jump now. Can I do Valerie? Yes. Valerie, so your question is, where do we go from here? What is the appropriate level of policy intervention at all the different levels? You work across the country, so are there lessons that we can draw on from outside of Mississippi and Alabama?
So I think at the base of all of this, we really need policies that raise the bar for all workers. These are things that can be done at the state level, have been done in state. I don't know that the prospect of them happening in southern states is as high as it is in some others. So then these are things that need to be done at the federal level. Specifically, I'm talking about policies related to improving non-wage conditions like scheduling. Talked a lot about that. Availability of paid leave, as well as raising the minimum wage, the federal minimum wage, which is the one that is binding in Mississippi and in Alabama. Then we also talk about unions. I think it's important to strengthen workers' rights to organize so that they can bargain directly with their employers. Again, at the federal level, we have the PRO Act that is going to be reintroduced this year that really puts some teeth behind the laws and really imposes some real penalties on employers that violate workers' rights to organize. Then we talked a lot about discrimination. Discrimination has been outlawed in this country for decades. I think the challenge and the issue now is enforcement of those laws. And to do that, we really have to address the unequal balance of power and the unequal balance of information between employers and employees, because there's an unfair burden placed on employees, one, to uncover discrimination, and then they have to take the risk of challenging it. Then there's the even higher burden of having to prove it, all while risking retaliation from their employer. So we need a stronger enforcement of those laws. And then the last thing I'll say is just the broader macro issue of trade policy and getting all of that in balance as a way of really strengthening our economy overall.
Thanks, Valerie. Thanks. I like the talk about the imbalance and the connection to the policy issues that Erica spoke about. So we're going to talk to Scott now. So since signing of the new flyer in Anniston, this was a major achievement for the community, the workers, and even the company itself. So is this a useful tool in your opinion to improve job quality? Is this something that you think might work in other areas?
To be brief, yes. I think was the prize New Flyer as a corporation when it came to the South and met the challenge of a community benefits agreement, that it was a coalition of unions and community leaders and faith leaders. Mississippi and Alabama have strong aspirational communities, and we both in the buckle of the Bible Belt. So we have community leaders, faith leaders, and we have unionizing drive that are powerful and strong going on right now. The thing we can agree on, we got to end is, we got to end the curse that human rights, humans have no rights that prophets are bound to respect. Another paraphrase of other one, that black folks have no rights, that white people are bound to respect, but we have started to end that process. Whatever you value in Michigan is less valuable than out in Mississippi. What you value in New York is less valuable in Alabama. So I know that we can't. The community benefits agreement is a great impact on more so than wages, but job quality. The fear of speaking up is gone. The idea of going up the ladder inside the plant, increases in pay and job responsibilities by promotion. The fear of that is gone. And most importantly, it is a documented and enforceable agreement. We just got through our second quarterly report. And that community gives a chance to review your progresses and not only make recommendations on how to improve it, implement some of the recommendations. And just, we can't find any qualified workers. Well, would you invest in helping us find that? You know, those kind of people. So this is the victory of democracy. Win what you fight for, and then help make it work. That's community benefits agreement.
Thanks, Don. We certainly appreciate your involvement with these benefits, the committee benefits, because these arrangements are critical to workers in these sites, in these areas as we move forward. Last but not least, Dave. So as local leaders consider recruitment strategies, what should they be considering for the quality of jobs to be created?
Well, I think what's in this report, and I do want to echo that, you know, Jackson State's esteemed reputation. I'm on the other end of I-20, and it stretches all the way there and around the world. And universities have a critical function here in exposing what's inside these plants and what's in the community. And reading this report was, just eye-opening as far as the racial and gender discrimination, as Dr. Wilson says, this is, that these are against the law. And companies, when they do make these agreements, should at the very least agree to uphold the law on the shop floor itself, on the factory floor. And that's the very least. And in addition, and I would echo again what Ms. Butler says, is, workers only have a few forms of leverage. One is politics, one is unions, and union organization is daunting. We would hope, the best you could hope from these companies when they do make the agreements is they would be neutral in union drives, as with the politicians in the state. That's not going to happen. Now, there have been a couple of cases of unionization in Alabama. In one part's plant, they voted 2-1 for the union. I don't know if they've ever negotiated a contract. The other leverage is the labor market. And one problem here, if you want something in these agreements, is not to use permatemps. And now this study shows there were very few temporary workers, and I've talked to Ian in that, and this may be a function of COVID and the tightening of the labor market. In some of these plants, a third and maybe a half of the workers are temporary workers. They're not employed by the company. They don't get the benefits of the job. And this seems to be the trend I think is going to restart after COVID, tight labor market. And maybe to at least guarantee the rights of temporary workers to get a job after a certain period. The other thing is there is a form of leverage, and this was said by my colleague here, that it's at the communities. And one thing this study does is it did interview just the workers, but people living in these communities. And you have to be shocked when they get a new plant here with factory jobs and they still say it hasn't improved our community. And that's a scandal. That's what the one thing they were promised to do. And so if the process can be affected politically at the recruitment process, these are public positions that should be open to sunshine laws and transparency. And everybody should have a voice in this, that's one thing that there's a possibility of gaining some leverage or some power.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for walking it down quite nicely this afternoon. Actually, so it is, it's 12:53. So we have 8 questions. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to ask all 8 questions. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to encourage the individual whose questions we did not get to talk to the panelists, because this is an absolute amazing wealth of information here that we really need to take advantage of. So I sent you the question, and I found one, I think it's from a student and a young person, I really wanted to ask this question. They say young people come to the South, Mississippi, to be educated cheaply. Then they leave the state for better wages, a better way of life. What can be done now to encourage the young and educated to stay in the state, to stop that drain and improve job quality? So I'm just going to pick randomly 2 individuals to answer these questions, if you guys don't mind, just for the sake of time. I'm in love with Erica, just in case y'all don't know. I think it's not a thing to you, but so what are your thoughts in terms of what can be done for these students and young people?
So being one of those people that got a Southern degree, grew up in the South, got a Southern degree, left, and we got back to the South 3 years ago, so I was on 20 years now. We came back home to work. It's common, that's what's happening, but as we shift, not only just economically to the South, people are shifting their social consciousness back to the South. And, with their social consciousness moving back to the South comes this spirit of transformation, which creates opportunities for us to come home and do the good work to be able to see our communities improve. So the thing you have to decide is, it's okay to leave and go and get your skill building and training and chops somewhere else, but you gotta promise to come back home and fix it, right?
Yeah, right.
But at the same time, we have to make the current employers here get with the program, like pay us, like teachers should not be getting paid $30,000 a year, like catch up, mustard. To really start valuing the workforce and putting in and investing in the human capital that's coming through. Then we'll see more people stay here. We want to stay in the South. The South is lovely. Come visit.
Thanks, Erica. I know you come too. I also just want to take a moment to apologize to those online, because unfortunately, because the chat feature is not enabled, we won't be able to take questions directly, but of course, at this point in time, yes. So we'll figure out another way to communicate with our online persons. So I'm going to ask Sandy on this question. What are some major and feasible recommendations to address structural racism to the level for families in the South?
I think that, again, we need to encourage our students to go to school. The system is broken here. We're fighting for our students to have the water in the classrooms, the water in our city. So again, like Erica said, it's okay to go out, but you have to come back and be a part of the solution. And we just need to start putting more pressure on our legislators. We've got to change the laws here in the state of Mississippi so that everybody has opportunity to better their way of life.
Okay,
I think that's a start.
thank you. Okay, let's try, I'm just picking people randomly. I hope you guys don't mind. So in terms, Dave, I'm gonna throw this one over to you. So in terms of the golden handcuff that Emily referred to, would some sort of jobs be considered predatory?
Well, I think these service jobs are, in a sense, have that reputation. And that by predatory, is that what you mean? Predatory, that they're preying on the most vulnerable? Well, yeah, and again, the communities are welcoming any jobs, but under the conditions that of the pay and the benefits, the only answer you can come up with is that they seek a workforce that has very little options. And this is how power works, is not giving vulnerable people an alternative. That's how dictators work, and that's how leaders of states that don't want true equity and true democracy work. You have to give people alternatives and options and opportunities. And if you have leaders who don't do that, then they're acting in an authoritarian manner.
Thanks.
I hate to say it, but that's what it is.
All right, Scott? What do you think is the best use of the data obtained from this research?
Whoa. Amazingly, simply enough. And some of the panelists have said it today. This data that links this research, that links people in communities, corporate incentives, corporate exploitation and human lives. It's like the nucleus of I won't call it a campaign, but upsurge in the related fields of research. So that now we document the core, we can document the satellites. We can document all the pure fields that really play into this. Everything from manufacturing stuff to supply chain stuff. How, it's almost like the core of how America works. Capital W-O-R-K. What makes America work? W-O-R-K. I think it can bring in some additional disciplines, and they all have a point of connection, so that there can be a much more universal in the USA appreciation of the work, the role, and values of indigenous communities in building, strengthening, and amplifying their power in their own communities through work.
Okay, thanks. Valerie, I'm gonna show this one to you so you guys recognize I'm giving everybody a chance to answer these questions. So Valerie, how do we also hold economic development agencies accountable to be more transparent?
Yeah, I think that also gets to the issue of political power and people's ability to hold those agencies accountable, to have transparency, so you know what decisions are being made, to understand who's going to benefit. I think one of the things that comes out of this discussion today is that we really have to understand who benefits from the way things are now. Somebody is. If that weren't the case, it wouldn't be happening. So really understanding who wins and loses and what's the trade-off of not doing something good, not just what are the potential benefits of taking a particular action, but what do we lose in not doing certain things that we know are good to do.
Okay, thanks, Valerie. So Bob, you're gonna round it out for us. So what does it take? What does it take? And where have you seen successful examples of where employers have actually changed their practices?
Employers changing their practices.
Well, I mean, I think, I'll say, I think employees have changed their practices when they're, I wouldn't say forced to, but when it becomes necessary for them to do that, primarily by different forms of pressures put on them, whether it's, a sit down strike, or whether it's a organization of a union, whether it's, things like that are community agreements in which there's coalitions of people that come together to try to put pressure on companies. It's not, I mean, I think if we look at this longer history, employers and the people that represent them in state government and stuff have, they've got incentives, they've got things that they're looking out for. They're trying to stay in power and to create as much wealth for themselves and their stockholders as they can. I don't think that the expectation should be that we're going to wait for them to do the right thing. The right thing has to be done in a different way. It has to be done by communities, by individuals, holding other people responsible, people who have control of wealth and control of capital and have these manufacturing companies. They have social and moral responsibilities, not just to themselves, but and not just all of us, but the world. I mean, that's why I think one of the things, these green jobs is a really important aspect of all of this. Is we've got to be engaged not just in the things that are happening from day to day, but we got to be thinking about 50, 100 years from now at the same time. So.
Okay, well,
Anyway.
thanks very much. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna throw the ball back over to Emily. And before I throw it to her, I just want to really give her a big shout out from my end, because it's been amazing. Could you give her a round of applause for me? It's been amazing working with her. Very young, very bright, very smart, very intuitive. I really appreciate the fact that I had the opportunity to work with her and to work with Ian, our consultant, who was our boss as well. So, but I'm going to throw it over to Emily. She's going to round this out by telling you guys thanks. And then I'm going to give you a few little logistics about the next steps on our launch. Emily?
Thank you so much, Dr. Herbert. And I will be quick because I realize I'm all that is standing between those assembled in person and lunch, and that's not a good place to be. So I promise to keep this quick. I just want to share a couple thoughts and wrap up and really express my gratitude to everyone assembled, especially the panel, right? Valerie, Bob, David, Erica, Sanchioni, Scott. I think that's everybody. Thank you for your engagement with the report, your feedback, your thoughts. I'm sure that I am not the only person walking away from this morning's event excited about what's possible and curious to learn more. So a few things that are going to resonate with me. Workers have delivered. That I think is such a powerful framing. And so what can we do to deliver for workers? Because as Sanchioni reminded us, the risk is real, right? I'll be thinking about that visual you painted of the single mother with 3 kids at home who is afraid to speak up about the sexual harassment because she literally cannot afford to lose her job. So what can we do as that community, that coalition, Scott, what can we do to support them? And when I say we, I mean all of us in this room and those of us that are zoomed in, we're the community groups, the churches, the academics, the students, the foundations. That is us. We are the ones that need to be applying this pressure that's been talked about. So I'm going to be thinking about these for a long time, and I just am really appreciative for this kind of fruitful discussion that we've had. The region and the world faces a lot of challenges, but knowing that there are so many of us that are working and thinking through and trying to make that change, it's inspiring. And so I just want to thank you all for keeping that flame of hope alive and that passion for progress alive, both I think in general, but also for me specifically. Thank you, because it fuels me. It makes me then excited to wake up and do this all over again. I also just want to say thank you to so many people. So thank you to the Jackson State team, Department of Urban and Regional Planning, Mrs. Smith and Mr. Bilbro for making sure the hybrid logistics work. It's not easy. I know the JMA team that coordinated logistics for the panel and registrations and so much other behind the scenes work. Paula and the Kellogg Foundation for their patience with us as we worked through this entire process and support from day one. Literally could not have done it without you, so thank you. Thank you to our research team. Ian, you shepherded us across the finish line in ways that could not have been possible without you, so thank you. And Dr. Herbert, yeah, you gave me my first job. I'll never forget that. And the fact that I said, we need help. You know, we need some more, we need support getting this out the door. This is important work and we want more voices here. We want more insight. Will you help? And you answered the call. And I'm so thankful for that. And I'm so thankful for the relationship that we've also built. Not our, we had our relationship, but now we're building those institutional relationships as well between our institutions with these foundations and these nonprofit organizations. I just am so grateful for you specifically, Dr. Herbert, and being so supportive from day one. Thank you. Yeah, anyways, that's a lot of thank yous. Now this really does feel like an Oscar speech, and I'm like, oh, I didn't thank my mom. She'll never forgive me, but she's not on the call, so she'll never know. But thank you to everybody that came and that's listened and engaged, and please do check out the report. I think it's interesting. It can be grim, but there's, we can't fix anything until we look at it. So that's what we're trying to do here today. So thank you very, very much to everyone involved. And I am hopeful for what we can make happen in the future. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Emily. So we've come to the end of today, and as Emily indicated, it was a massive effort to get this thing undertaken, but it was real. We're looking to Jeremy and Kellogg's for some more money, just putting that out there. Because the reality is that a couple of things. Number one, we're able to educate our students, to train our students, to put our students out there. We form these awesome partnerships, we grow. So these are amazing. So I wanted to also mention Devere. So Devere is in charge of the JMA office based in Birmingham, Alabama. And I wanted to mention Angela. Angela is responsible for the Mississippi Coalition for JMA as well. So I wanted to mention those two as partners here. And I'm gonna pinpoint one person. I think, oh no, she's right there. She's always very supportive of me. Her name is Dr. Persephone McDaniels. Every time I invite her to stuff, she comes. So she's the Dean of the Graduate Studies. So I just wanted to tell her thanks. All right, publicly tell her thanks. All right. So at this point in time, it's lunch, and I know you guys are hungry. So, I have an awesome team, guys. When you walk out there, I have a team of about 5 office workers and students. They are awesome. Please tell them, please be nice to them. But but you can exit either doors, that way or that way, and go and grab some lunch, socialize, talk, have fun, enjoy. And thank you guys so very much again. We appreciate you.